this. I love this.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
Dave Harrison.
Good.
I'm Dave Harrison. Do you guys wear Columbia stuff?
Of course.
Yeah, look at these
Yeah.
shoes right here. Yeah. You brought a bunch of
Awesome.
passes, right?
That is just, I brought so many passes. I get like 6 of those a year. But I love you guys, you know. I figured, how many of you guys have checked out TFS Preview? TFS 2012? Anybody else? Okay, Julie has, awesome. Okay, so maybe we'll kind of start a little bit with kind of a basic demo of what TFS 2012 looks like, and then we'll drill down into Agile, like the theory behind it, but first we'll start with how it might look. Does that sound like a good plan to everybody? Sweet, all right. Good, and you got a nice little lectern here for me to... Anyway, I'm Dave Harrison. I'm the .NET Development Team Lead over at Columbia Sportswear. And this is TFS 2012. I would love to take credit for that GUI. It's really, really nice. It's much improved. I'm going to be honest with you. I thought TFS 2010 was terrible. Terrible in the sense of the Agile and the Scrum template. When you went to go add a new bug or a new story, it was like you were staring at the console of a 747 jet. There were so many fields. It was confusing. The web interface, I thought, was very clunky. So we used Rally software quite a bit for the first year. So I'm going to tell you everything I did. Whenever I'd make a mistake, my dad would say, well, did you learn something? I've made a lot of mistakes. I'd like to share them with you to help save you guys some time. Because Agile's a great, you can actually pick it up and try it for a couple weeks. And then ask your team, ask your customers, is this working? And if it's not, you can try something else. I do not feel that Agile and Scrum is the magic bullet. It will cure any problem, cure cancer. I don't feel that way. I do think it's an excellent way of developing software, but it may not fit every project in every enterprise. So I can talk a little bit about that. But this is TFS 2012, and I'm just going to kind of blitz right through the front end at a very top level, and then I'll move on with my presentation. But the great part is you can see right there, top left, you can add a product backlog item or a story. How many of you guys are aware of basic terminology? Okay, so everybody knows. And in TFS 2012, it seemed like about 25 to 40% of the classes had to do with Scrum. So people are aware of it, but we're really not sure how to integrate it. Or yeah, my company's not really in on it yet. Or we call it Agile, but it's really waterfall, right? Yeah, and that's common. That's how Columbia started out. But anyway, so I'm glad you guys know the basic terminology. You can see right there that the top left, you can add a new product backlog item. The web interface is terrific. So you give all of your BAs, in my email signature line, I'm like, here's my backlog. Please add stuff. Here's our retrospectives. Please dump anything, please view it. And it's great being able to hand this to a project manager, like Elaine back there, or a BA, and say, enter and work for my team. That's great because you don't have to say no. As developers, we hate saying no. One of the things I love about Agile is I don't have to. People can punch in their work. I have work for the sprints. Adding a drop-down list to the interface. And you assign it to yourself, for example. And you quote in it. And the effort I usually quote in 4 different... I used to get very particular about the effort quote. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't, because guess what? In a shocking turn of events, all technology projects take longer than you think they're going to, and they cost more, and you're not able to deliver the functionality you thought you would in 2 weeks, right? Shocking. So don't obsess too much over... I just do t-shirt sizes. Small, medium, large, extra large. So 1, 2, 3, or 4-point sizes. So I'm going to punt. This is a fairly large... Well, this is a small quote, isn't it? It's about 1. And in the description, again, a business analyst or a PM will be a very detailed description. Maybe a link to a SharePoint document library. But you can also just copy and paste in whatever you want, including images, into that screen, and click Save. And it adds it to the backlog. If you go on to tfspreview.com, you can get an account for yourself created today, if you wanted, and start adding your different team members. This is TFS Preview. It's publicly available. It's free. We don't know when TFS 2012 is going to come out. I hear possibly as soon as the 15th of this month. That's what I hear from Microsoft. So when that happens, there's going to be a lot of changes. They've promised us, though, use this as your playground. When the time comes, we're going to give you guys the tools you need to migrate all of your stories, all of your tasks into your TFS server that's in-house. But the cloud-based version, Team Foundation Service, will always be more up-to-date than the one that they have, the standalone version. So when I added that, you'll notice I added a backlog item. And I could click on the board, for example. If you're a BA or a manager, you're going to be mainly looking at those top 4 buttons, adding a bug, adding a story item or a task. Usually it's the developers. I mean, all the project managers care about is not even who's doing the work. When are we going to be done? How long is the project going to take? As a developer, when you're doing your planning, isn't that nice? You can click and drag your different items in the order, just like this. So when you are sitting down with the business owner saying, what do you want to have done? You can quickly change the order by clicking and dragging. When you do that, you'll notice I say sprint, the forecast is on, and I generally think my team can get 10 story points done every 2 weeks, right? So I know how many more months of work that I've got ahead of me. So that's a really powerful, much more intuitive and easy to manipulate list of things that I need to work on. If I was to click on this current sprint, there in the top left, I can quickly add new tasks with those little crosses there in the left. And I can say, okay, doing some work. And this is in hours. Task it to myself. And I can say that that's going to be about 50 hours, right? And you'll notice that burn down chart just changed on the top right. So I always encourage and ask you to show what's really going on. So if it's Wednesday, your sprint started on Monday, and the PM comes in and says you got to do this right now, or it's Thursday and your developer friend says, I thought this was going to be 8 hours, but guess what? It's not going to work out of the box. We'll have to write our own. Show it. Have it go like this, and be honest about it. So you'll also, one really cool thing is the capacity tab right there in the middle. So I could add different vacation days. I could say this developer, each of my developers, I'm assuming is about 6 hours a day. And if we have vacation days, I factor it in. And that way, when I'm looking at the sprint, again, there'll be little bars that will appear with like red if I'm overtasking a particular developer. Any questions about TFS 2012? Because I promise I just skim right through it and then go into the presentation. This is a great tool, and I love the fact that it's free for us to preview. So go to tfspreview.com and give it a try for your team. See if you can't work with it a little bit. The best part I thought was, you've probably been on if you've ever done Scrum, you'll see the burn down chart. Everybody loves a burn down chart, right? And you have the cliff, where until the last day of sprint, everything suddenly magically is done. Right? Wow, magic! That's bad, obviously, because people aren't updating what they're doing. Why aren't they updating what they're doing? Because it's a pain in the butt. If it takes longer than 5 minutes a day, it's bad. Let's be honest. We've seen some Agile implementations, so-called Agile, where you have 20 or 30 people in a circle every day. Can you imagine how long that meeting takes? What a drain on productivity that is. So, and then at the end of 2 weeks, there's no retrospective, there's no demos, Work is kind of done, but not really done. That's not Agile, is it? And so if it's not easy to do, developers won't do it. I know my guys and we don't like spending more than 5 minutes a day on administration. This is administration. So if it takes longer than 5 minutes, that's bad. So our daily stand-ups, a lot of times we'll use a stopwatch. And we'll keep people to no more than 60 to 90 seconds. What I did yesterday, what I did today, blockers. I've worked in some I'm getting a lot of head nodding there. I've worked in some places where I knew my manager had very little idea of what I was doing. How am I, Dave Harrison, adding value to the business? That's kind of dangerous, because if I'm not adding value to business, why am I here? Right? So it was nice, and in the stand-up, I know as a manager, if my guys are facing a problem, there's a blocker, right? And I can get it cleared up right away instead of people sitting on their hands every day. I will tell you something that I'll get into a little bit later. I'll do that later. But check out the board. Have you guys ever used Kanban at all? Anybody? Yeah?
Do you want questions as you go along, or would you like
Throw 'em
to
out.
hold them to the end?
Go ahead and ask me questions.
Well, I'm a little troubled
Okay?
by the assigning of stories and tasks to
Right.
individuals as opposed to just it being work for the team.
Right. And I actually covered that in my presentation.
Okay, good.
Yes.
All right.
No,
I can wait.
that's a very good point.
Yeah,
Teams have different maturity levels,
yeah.
and I as a manager have a different maturity level. I'm pretty immature.
I can help you with that.
So and that's a lesson that we learn from doing it wrong. It's not good to pre-assign tasks. So we'll talk about that.
Thanks.
This is Kanban type, and I love this. Talk about doing something in 5 minutes. If I have a new task that appears, an email comes in saying there's been a new change in this delivery. I can add this, change Sprock for new fields, pretty quickly, add it to myself. Tasks, yes, always should have one person assigned. And then I do a quote in hours. I'm going to say this is a 40-hour task. My burn down chart will change to reflect that, and it should, because my work just went up. I can click and drag it to being in progress, and I can change the person assigned, for instance, to my buddy Dave Turner. And I can also say, no, we actually made progress on this. There's just 20 hours left. Burn down chart will change. And then when it's done, drag it over. That's a great interface. It's very simple, very easy to use. So I think once you guys get started with it, you're going to find your developers spend all of their time on the board piece. Your PMs and your BAs will be right here on the home page. That's more of the manager view. So, but I think you'll like the way this is split up. Yes?
How do you integrate your QA and your product owner acceptance in this tool?
And that's an interesting point. I actually get into that a little bit in the presentation. It's hard getting business and stakeholder involvement. We've invited people to our demos, for example. That's helped quite a bit. I've sat down individually with the different business owners. That's actually probably been the most effective, is one-on-one sessions, just me and the person who represents the business. And I also send out an email every 2 weeks that says, hey, here's a snapshot of what we're working on. Is this correct? If not, please let me know. I can't tell you that that's a magic armor against a Wednesday morning surprise. I wish I could. But it does help. Getting business buy-in has been very painful because we sell jackets at Columbia. We're not a software development company, right? So it's not clean. Ken Schwaber, everything he wrote on Scrum, very clean. And we really care about the quality of code. At Columbia, our priorities are different. If it doesn't cut costs or help us sell jackets, it's very hard to get traction. So I can tell you authoritatively, doing Scrum has saved us tens of thousands of dollars, easily. Because I know right away if I'm doing something wrong. Within 2 weeks, we're showing it to the person. They're like, no, that's not what I wanted. Are you crazy? At least I'm hearing that now, not 9 months from now, right? So it has helped us. It has not hurt us. It has not added a lot of administration. This is an easy tool to use. It's hard to get business buy-in. We encourage our developers to sit down mid-sprint if we can and get acceptance. And that way we can say, yes, the business signed off, it's done. So we don't wait till Friday when we're doing our demos. So, okay, no questions for now. Anything else? I'll launch right into the presentation. Like I say, I was going to tell you a story about how great we are, but I don't think that's a lot to learn from there. I can tell you about, did you guys read Scott Hanselman's great post on the hierarchy of needs? Wasn't that terrific? Yeah, okay, I thought it was good, but anyway. I thought it was a good point, though, that you don't get a boast about something until you're taking care of the basics. I mean, that's true. You talked about, we were talking earlier about test-driven development, for example. That's fantastic. Continuous integration is big. So on my team, we have like a 2-page manifesto the developers have kind of put together about things we'd like to see, or need to see, for a project to be considered done. Scott said, just like we have, you can't really talk about art or, anything fancy if you're not putting food on the table. That's a hierarchy of needs there you have to meet. The same thing's true with us as programmers. So this was this is the Harry Potter hat of excellence. We drew that back in February. It's so ugly. I drew it. But you got, oh my goodness. Anyway, it's basically we talked about the things that we needed to do better. I thought that was great because we admitted, we're not perfect and we need to get better at things like refactoring our code, at doing design and peer reviews. So we circled a couple of those and worked on it. That's a great example of a retrospective, where you're saying, as a development team, we can do better when it comes to this. So Scott walked through it in his post, but basically it's, can you revise your code? Are you using TFS? Are you documenting? That's been a big help in our team, having SharePoint, using a wiki, one place to find things, and being able to search for it and find it. Continuous integration is very easy to do in TFS. And that's been big, having a QA built environment. Being able to verify your bugs, having things like automated unit tests, like with ReSharper, is great. And having design reviews and peer reviews. Julie's very, very good at right-clicking on some code and saying, please check this. And having our demos has been good for me because I can't cheat anymore. I can't be lazy. I love being lazy. I can't do it because I have to show people code now. I can't do a PowerPoint deck. So it makes me kind of dot every I and cross every T. Forces me to be honest. So little things like having a blog and a team wiki has been very good for us in Columbia. And that's when you can start talking about like naming conventions and things like that. But I did want to talk to you guys about 3 projects. And I think the Agile aficionados among us might start nodding their head. There was 3 projects. One for Columbia over the past couple years. One was a sales portal, and we were charged about $150,000 from the vendor, and they outsourced it to India. I think they probably paid their consultants about $20,000, maybe less. It is a hunk of poo. In a shocking turn of events, maybe using Access as a front end was not a great idea. No one could have seen this coming. You click on a drop-down list, it takes 10 or 15 seconds to get results from a drop-down list. It's god-awful. I cannot imagine, as a salesperson, entering a 100-line or a 1,000-line sales order, and it takes you to the top every time, and every time you click on a drop-down 10, can you imagine the frustration? The homicidal rage our users get into. That was obviously not a success. It was for the consulting company because they walked off with $130,000 in profit. We're not going to use them again. There was another company we used as well. This was for like corporate responsibility. We don't wish to have our factories that we contract our work to end up in the news, right? This company, they quoted it $150,000. I think they cut quite a bit out to get business with Columbia. All the fat they could trim. The most detailed spec I have ever seen. 150 pages on the GUI alone. It was beautiful. Every single feature So well documented. About 6 months into the project, those developers, because the customer was legal, guess what? Legal really cares about contracts. They don't care about our feelings, right? So every single feature had to be delivered exactly as they interpreted, even when that interpretation was maybe a little gray area, for exactly the timeline we wanted. So they were having to throw in extra consultants. I imagine they probably lost about $170,000. And they were working 16-hour days, 7 days a week. The irony, of course, is that this was software to track our compliance, like for safe working standards in Malaysia. We're treating these Malaysian workers better than we are our programmers. So something's wrong there. We're also not going to use them again, probably. And yet, they bent over backwards for us, yet it was interpreted as a failure. The third project I want to talk to you about, it was an integration project in BizTalk. Also went over time. Also went over budget. Also required more resources than we thought. Maybe weren't able to deliver exactly what we would have liked to have done. And this happens with every IT project you and I have been involved in, right? All 3 points of that iron triangle, they're not so iron. Everything has to shift, it seems like. But it was interpreted as a success, and it was a success. Actually, all 3 of those projects delivered what they were supposed to. Only the third one, though, is qualified as a success, and we'll go back to that consulting company again. What made the difference? The third one had an on-site project manager. Every 2 weeks he was working with the business, scaling back expectations, negotiating, working with the developers, holding them to certain expectations. That made all the difference, having the on-site PM. So as a company, I'm telling you right now, when I first started on board Columbia, I did not want to share what I was doing with people like Elaine up there. They were the enemy, the BAs, right? They're our best friends. They are our best friends. They're our bridge to the business. And a lot of times, if you have a project manager or BA, yes, that's why the shift in corporations has been what it's been, because they've realized a lot of these IT projects that have quote-unquote failed, they had very bright people working on it. That second company did cutting-edge stuff, cutting edge. But what made the difference was the business and not being surprised and getting what they asked for around the time that they wanted it. And there wasn't any unpleasant, that negotiation with the business made the difference. So you're aware of that funnel of death from McConnell? That factor? I don't understand why it is we give an estimate and suddenly Moses coming down from Mount Sinai. Developer said 3 months. There it is. But that's the way it is sometimes. That factor is off by 300 to 400% at the project inception. Yet it is right there at product concept, around the requirement specification stage. That's when a business lumber comes by with a coffee cup. And, yeah, so how long do you think that's going to take anyway? We're going to need you to work through the weekend, right? That's when they're going to ask you for a quote, and whatever you tell them is suddenly you're going to find it thrown back at you. You said it'd be done by August 15th. It's August 15th. Where's my software, right? So I don't understand why that happens. I do know, when I talk to my buddy in the trades about this, he's like, dude, what, you're telling me your projects go overtime and over budget? That's how we make our living. They're called change orders. We build them into every single project. Elaine's nodding her head, she knows. In the construction trade, a building like this or a hallway like this, everything's physical and tangible. So if they ask for a change, they can easily say, well, that's going to require this much more. But because you can't touch code and feel code, I think physiologically there's a reason why managers are saying, well, sorry, that's a direction change. And you're not allowed a quote-unquote change order. Stuff like that is why Agile was invented. It's because we acknowledge the business has the right to change their mind. I didn't want to share with you this picture because I thought it was interesting. First off, I should ask, how many people are bored by history? Be honest. Wow, we are at PADNUG. Yes! More about history. There's a book called To Rule the Waves by Arthur Herman, and it makes for a very compelling read, especially the part about the Spanish Armada. Not one person that got on those ships thought they were going to make it. they knew they were on a doomed project from the very beginning. You know, it's true. The only person who was confident of success was the project manager. Built the second. Great guy. Terrible administrator. Very hardworking. He'd get up like 4 or 5 in the morning, work until midnight. Everything had to be personally signed off by him. He was an unbelievable micromanager. Right down to every barrel full of water and hook and, tar. I don't know what they made ships of back then. But it's interesting. Everyone knew it was going to be a failure. One of the sailors said, look, the English are just going to sit there and pound us to pieces, which is exactly what happened. But you couldn't tell Philip II that. He said, no, it's going to be fine. We're on target. We're going to meet our objectives. Their objectives were hard set. No one could refactor it. You couldn't scale back expectations or change things. And the interesting thing was the King of Spain never visited the Armada or looked at the ships. He never had any idea of what problems his captains were facing. There were some brilliant people associated with the Spanish Armada. Every single one of them, their talents were wasted. They were never really listened to. One of the counselors said, what's going to happen if we face bad weather in the English Channel? Philip II said, well, since this is all for his cause, God will send us good weather. I've been in way too many projects where God has decided the outcome. It's usually a thumbs down. So, anyway, do read that book. It's fascinating, but from an IT perspective, the management was isolated from the daily realities. Here's your date to set sail. Go set sail. A lot like IT projects, right? The deliverables were fixed and inflexible. Initiative was not rewarded, but was punished. They had a yes man in charge of the Armada. And he said, well, we've been given our orders. Let's go. A very top-down management style. There was excessively long meetings and reams of paper documentation. A lot of them. Meetings are the bane of my life. I'm a manager. Some meetings are great. A lot of meetings are bad, right? They had a ton associated with this project. And there was no incremental learning and a lack of buy-in from the project team. So that was a failed project. Does everybody remember Apollo 13, that great movie? When they walk in with that bag full of stuff. Yeah, that's a terrific part. And that's a picture of it going on right there, where they're like, okay, dumping out all the stuff. This is what the astronauts have on the capsule, make it happen. So it's kind of like what Clint Eastwood said, improvise, adapt, overcome. I do love that about Agile, and it's not just a slogan. I'm not saying it's perfect, but you are given some tasks to accomplish in 2 weeks. Team, go get it done. And you won't have Philip II or someone like him in the management, the Dilbert pointy-eared guy, coming by asking, are you done yet? I do love, in Agile, I think there's 2 things that appeal to me. Isolation, because you have a 2-week bubble you're working in, and accountability. So that way management knows they've promised they're going to get this done, they're going to get it done. In general, successful teams, effective teams are transparent about their work, and I do think tools are important. We're in IT, so we tend to obsess about tools and the software we use. And in this case, it does make the difference. Like, we noticed a huge difference in efficiency going from TFS 2010 to Rally. And we also noticed a big difference when we went to TFS 2012. Each time we've made a change, it gets easier and easier. I mean, our demos take 2 hours. Our daily stand-ups, 5 minutes. So that's administrative cost for a team of 5 or 6 people. That's pretty reasonable. And effective teams are transparent about their work. I do think, in terms of pros and cons, we build up our credit. All relationships, including business ones, are credit and debit. Right now in my marriage, I don't know where I'm at. I have to check with my wife every day. There's the burn down chart's pretty severe in that one. But it's true though. I mean, businesses, building up a good relationship as a team takes time. And we were very much stuck in firefighting mode 2 years ago. It was hard. Every day we'd have the new emergency, a chicken running around with its head cut off kind of thing. Drop everything and work on this. It was impossible to focus, to get work done. So shifting to planning out, it's unreasonable to say, we're going to take 6 months and just work on this now. The business isn't going to wait 6 months. But it is reasonable to say, give us 2 weeks. Give us 2 weeks. And that way we can put our headphones on and keep our heads down and really work on these problems. And I'll tell you my personal problem, I like refactoring. I think probably you guys do too. All good programmers do. But sometimes we're our own worst enemies when it comes to Yagni. You ain't going to need it. And the sin of premature optimization. Sometimes we'll spend a week on something that could have been 8 hours because we want to get it just perfect. In Agile, it's harder to do that. And I think there's 100 or 1,000 different ways of interpreting it. There was in Tech Ed 2012 in Orlando. They said, okay, who out there is doing Scrum? And everybody raised their hand. Okay, who of you is doing it right? Like 5 guys, and they were lying. They were lying. So it's kind of like the Bible. There's one Bible. Ken Schwaber wrote the Bible on Scrum and Agile. But there's so many different interpretations. And that's okay. I would never tell another team, do work my way. I would never do that. This is the right way of doing it. I can tell you some of the things that I learned. But I think that I know for a fact, in this room, there's people out there in software development teams that are farther up that pyramid of maturity than my team. And there's teams that are below mine. And every enterprise has a different culture and values. So I'm not going to tell you how to go about doing stuff. And there's room to make it your own. As far as the negatives or some of the bad parts about Agile, I said there it doesn't help ace programmers. I don't think that's true now. That was true a couple months ago. I think it does help. It helps present at least what you're doing. It particularly helps, I think, the 90% of us that are good, solid programmers. We had Buck Woody from Microsoft say, oh, Agile, for people who can't get enough bureaucracy, you know. And Buck's brilliant, you know, and that's, I don't think it's a lot of bureaucracy, but there it is. And the gentleman here brought this out. What happens, I've got this N-tier project. Every time I make a change to a field, it causes these cascading, you know, problems and more hours. What happens if you make a bad architecture choice? Is Agile a good fit? And the answer is, there's a problem with Agile, and that is if you make a bad bet, sometimes you can find yourself straying, not cleaning up your code as you go along, not refactoring, not allowing enough time to resolve technical debt. And you can find yourself, after 6 months, with a very warty project of something that's very technically kind of up and down. I think if you have a team of solid performers, they're going to do well in waterfall or in using Scrum or Agile. But it's true, because we're focused every 2 weeks on producing something that's good enough to release. It is true that sometimes you can neglect architecture. So I think there's room for coming up with a solid set of specs before you start writing a line of code. I do. And I don't think Gantt charts are going the way of the dodo. Just going to say that. Agile breaks down after 2 weeks. It has the shelf life of warm milk. So if you want to be able to say as a PM, here's our progress, here's where our endpoint is, you can use that capacity or that forecasting chart. But guess what? What we found on our team, my team's time was free. So every time I do 4 hours worth of work, 8 hours would get lumped on. There is no end date. Sometimes that's a problem. You know, what you want to, as a consultant, you could charge people for that time. So sometimes you do, and that's my job, have to say no. Please. Did someone have a question? No. Okay. I'm sorry for calling you out there. It does break down with teams less. I think the official rule is between 6 to 10. That's pretty much been true. I think you can do it with 4 or 5 people. We have on my team. But it's silly to do a daily stand-up with yourself. Feel crazy talking to yourself in a room. And more than 10, and those daily stand-ups become really a problem. So Ken Schwaber talks about a scrum of scrums. That's where you have like a representative from each team meet together. It's worked. It gets a little unwieldy. I do think it works great if you can have 6 to 10 people where you got a little bit of everything mixed in. Your BAs, your testers, your PMs, everybody and anybody you can get there in that little group associated with the project. So we did learn, I started doing my retrospectives, and at first I just kept it in a team, and I kind of went like this. But our retrospectives, Julie, you know, they're pretty honest. And it's good. As a team, we sit down, we talk about things we'd like to, what value did we add to business? Okay, great. What value are we going to add to business? Now, what didn't work? And we write it down and we email it. We don't put in all the cuss words. Sometimes we replace them. But it works. And we post it on our blog, and then I send out a link to everybody. That has been a huge help, because that way I don't have people coming up to me saying, what have you done for me lately? Or what's your progress? It's right there in the board, and it's right there in a retrospective. Hey, that was finished. So they can check the progress of their tasks.
Okay.
Yes?
How much time do you spend on your sprint plan?
Sprint planning, demos, and our retrospective is about 2 to 2.5 hours. Sometimes they can be as long as 4. Is that about right, Julie?
It's usually faster than that. We go pretty quick. We're
Yeah.
done by lunch.
Yeah.
We're always done by lunch.
We also started off not doing demos. A big mistake. Big mistake. Demos are important. It's a chance for us. I mean, Julie, you've enjoyed it, I think. Here's what we're working on, you know. And you're showing code, not PowerPoint decks. So it's nice.
Keeps you honest, too.
Keeps us honest. I have to show the dirtiness. I had to show it this REST service. By the way, there's 24 lines of code. Worked hard on that one. You know, REST is awesome. So anyway, but yes, it keeps you honest. Everyone on the team can see what's involved, so there's no magic. And that way, if they want a piece of it later, they won't be so siloed or afraid. Oh, it was just this. And Julie and our team and Dave Turner has been really, really good at writing very detailed walkthroughs of here's how I did this. And that way, it's not just one member of the team is the only one who knows how to write services. And another one is a front-end expert. And I'll tell you right now, one of the shortcomings I've had to overcome as a manager is a tendency to be built to second and to pre-assign tasks. So we're starting to get away from that. It's bad news because you have a hardworking developer who may be very good at writing, for instance, older code, and they get stuck in that silo. Wouldn't it be great if they could just go to the backlog and pull off a .NET project and get to work on it? By pre-assigning tasks, I'm forcing people into a corner, into a label. That's bad. So, please.
I'm reading into some of your comments you've done with pair programming.
On what?
Is that correct? You do not do pair programming?
We have somewhat, but no, not formally. Yeah. How have you found pair programming?
A lot of the time it's terrific. It solves a lot of the problems we've been talking about.
Right.
In my opinion. Like a developer who's more familiar with the older style or talking about coding standards. Those things spread through the team very quickly by mutual consent without formal process. If you just have people switch pairs down pretty often. You don't have to code everything. We, at one point, did everything in pairs.
Right.
We decided that wasn't fully efficient. There's some code that just doesn't need to be coded.
Okay.
Whether it's complicated or it's useful to spread information or whatever. It's really helpful, and it just happens that way. You get really good. You don't have that. You don't need to do code review because you did it while you wrote the code.
Right.
And,
Right.
Other people are cross-pollinating each other, their features. Hey, I just picked this up on the blog. I got this cool key combination in Visual Studio. You just learn it.
Right.
You don't have to take any special time to pick that stuff up. It's really great.
Maybe we'll try it down the road. We have done some pair programming when we do transition, code reviews and things like that, but what you said is a big piece of XP programming, right?
Yes.
That's perfectly viable. I don't think Scrum and Agile will solve every problem, and what you just mentioned, that's a terrific example of, like there's room for prototyping, there's room for Spiral, there's all sorts of different project methodologies. There's a dirty secret about Agile, and that is it doesn't matter what you use as long as a team signs on to it, right? So by all means try it and see if it works. And here I'm a little different from Ken Schwaber and several other people. I've been in some some sprint planning sessions where it's very top-down, and the project manager says, you will be doing this, you will be doing that, and it reminded me of the method of making foie gras, with the developers being the geese. Because everyone had to hold up a card saying how long they think a certain task is going to take, including people who are not working on it, non-technical people like, like in that case, it was the PM. And the lowest card always won. And each developer had 80 hours worth of work for a 2-week sprint. I'm not a mathematician, but that means that team is going to be working a lot of 120-hour weeks. That's not good long term. How can a team sign on to that? So I don't like poker cards, personally. The person, when we do our sprint planning, I line it out with the business owner, or we do it in our sprint planning session. We kind of arrange different tasks in the order that we feel offers a business value, and then I check in later with the business owner. And then we task it out. We say, okay, it's going to be 4 hours here, or 6 hours for this, or 8 hours for that. Who wants this? Who wants that? And, but the person doing the work should be the one allowed to do the estimate, I feel. I feel very strongly that it's not cool to force a team. We're all developers, we're all adults, and we're all responsible. And it's not cool to force a developer to overcommit when he knows so long weekends, so long evenings. The other thing that I like is a reward, and we'll talk about that later for getting work done. Demos do matter. Have a definition of done. Your DSUs must be short, your daily stand-ups. Don't fuss over estimating stories. And don't lock out BAs, testers, and PMs. Our documentation standard in Scrum and Agile is good enough, just good enough. So you don't overdo it with a long technical spec, because it's going to be worthless on day one. So what was that? There was a general who said plans are useless. Planning is essential. I think that's true with Scrum. It doesn't mean you throw all planning out the window, and it doesn't mean you start work on your web front end without thinking through your architecture. Maybe you start your sprint the day of your architecture plan being in place. But you don't spend forever polishing documentation, because that doesn't add value to the business. The business wants to see code. We failed our first sprints, and by failed I mean we had tasks that weren't done. We still have tasks that aren't done. So I'm going to be honest. I love the fact that we don't just move our sprints or move these tasks so magically they never happened. We show it as not being done, and that's good. I think you have to be honest when you're doing your sprint. It does require frequent rechecks to prevent sag. You have to kind of maintain it, because there's going to be features that will chafe your team that you need to adjust. And there's going to be some new things that you want to add in that would help throughput. And it does require buy-in from the business on testing and no fixed functionality lists. That can't be overstated. That classic project management triangle of time, resources, functionality, you can't get around it. And if you have a good VM or a good project manager, good PM, that's hilarious. If you have a good project manager or a VA like Lane over there, they can make or break the success of your project, because you're going to hit rocks. So someone that can interpret it, developers are terrible at times in communicating with the business, right? If you have a good interpreter to kind of couch it different and say, you can have this, but it's going to cost you that. That will make or break the success of your project. It is true that I've seen some great waterfall projects. I've seen some terrible Agile ones. So I don't think it's a magic bullet, it's how you do it. But I do know that the successful ones that I saw, the PMs were embedded with the team. It wasn't us versus the PM. We were able to change major pieces of how we were arranging the project and scheduling it, so that the PM was very flexible. And we were able to go with different models. It wasn't Scrum for everything. And you could kind of do that tightrope walk. So you don't sacrifice on quality. This is, I was at a company one time and they say, you know, we don't believe in 100% efficiency. We believe in 100% utilization. This is a fully utilized freeway, right? This is a 217 when I come home from work at 5. I'm going to start crying. I'm getting very emotional. Oh, anyway. Yeah, this is a fully utilized freeway, right? But there's no flow. That's a problem. On my teams, for example, we started out allowing 35, 40 hours of work a week. I thought that was reasonable. We weren't getting our work done. And it wasn't because we weren't working hard. We were. It was because we'd have bugs come in. If we couldn't let them slip, we have an emergency. I had to make an estimate as far as how many hours. I mean, I used to treat bugs as being a nuisance, and they are a nuisance. But if I hang up on the business and say, I'll get to your bug later, what does that say about my commitment to supporting Columbia? I couldn't put off bugs. We can't say, see you later. So we just say, okay, historically speaking, we know half of our time is going to get tied up with some unexpected crisis or bugs. So I only allow 20 hours of dev work per developer per week on my team. That's because we have a lot of technical debt, and we have a lot of legacy apps we have to support. So this is a fully utilized freeway. As developers, does this look like our life? What's our reward for getting work done? More work. That sucks. And Ken Schwaber says, when you're done with your work for a sprint, you go to the backlog and you pull it out and you add it to your sprint. I say BS. I say go home, spend time with your family. If you can get your work done in 8 hours, are we adding value to the business Tuesday through Friday by showing up? Why aren't we rewarded for finding an innovative way of solving that problem? I'd rather have my code is expensive to maintain. I'd rather have my developers at home going surfing or biking or doing whatever you want to do, spending time with your families, rather than finding more work, because then we're saying, as a company, we value you sitting in a chair Monday to Friday, 8 hours a day. That's what we value, instead of solving problems. And I think that's a little dehumanizing. So I think another reason why I like Agile is because when you're done with your work, you can kind of give a sigh of relief and say, I'm done for the week. There's been times I've worked through the weekend so I could get that well-deserved 1 or 2 days off. That's nice. I won't go into this in a lot of detail. Will be in the notes we'll send you guys. But you're probably aware, of course, of Lean. Lean is where Agile came from. And you Agile proponents out there, you might recognize a lot of those. Taiichi Ohno came up with this taxonomy of waste, and Toyota, as we all know, blew apart the manufacturing world. And it wasn't because they had smarter people, it's because their processes were better. Every person on the floor had the power to find and to name different waste that he could see in his job, and then solve it himself. That's incredibly empowering. So it wasn't just a team of experts that were coming in. Ford had them, GM had them. Very smart group of experts, top down. But that wasn't as powerful as having a whole company full of people empowered to make change. So it's a bad thing for a company when I walked over to someone sometime and said, listen, you can do this in a SharePoint list, and you could be done, this could be done in like 5 minutes. And she's like, oh, that's just one of 100 things, hoops I have to go through each day. That's a bad thing for a company, isn't it? That's waste, and it's wasteful of human capability. So this is in terms of software development. I'd steal it pretty much word for word from a book, a great one. I should remember the name of it. But the enemy of flow definitely is waste. And if you have a company with a lot of that going on, it's hard to get your work done because there's so many bureaucratic hoops you have to jump through. This is another reason, and this is the reason why Agile, I feel, works very well, is because we don't say to the business, no, you can't have that. We say, okay, I don't have room in these 2 weeks to do everything, so what things are important? Why that is important is in this chart. We all believe in multitasking, right? Oh, I'm a great multitasker. Nobody, even computers don't multitask. They split cycles, right? We don't multitask. And you can see it in this chart. If you've got more than, let's say you have 5 concurrent projects going on, what's your efficiency like? The loss due to context switching at that point is around 80%. And that means literally out of a work week, 80% of their work that week is going to be spent, let's see, I think that documentation, trying to pick up their train of thought. This is a fact. This is out of many, many different studies they come up with that chart. And we all have lots of concurrent projects going on. And we all have Outlook sitting there giving us reminders, right? It's a bad thing in terms of productivity. So if we all can keep the number of projects that we're focused on in each 2-week period, let's say you're doing 2-week sprints, to 1 or 2, you're going to really improve your efficiency quite a bit. And we talked about how I've seen lots of metrics, like thousands of lines per developer. I don't know what your company values or uses, but I do think the number of bugs in the backlog is probably one of the best metrics available for measuring the efficiency of a team. Because it says, each time we don't resolve a bug, Microsoft did a study, it's 40 hours worth of work. Every time we had to say no to a bug because, no, there's higher priority ones out there, it's another 40 hours invested before that could again come back to the developer and be resolved. That's a heavy debt. So every time we have to turn away a problem and defer it, that technical debt builds up. It's not good to hide that. If Agile isn't an option for your company, Scott Hansman again had a post a couple of days ago that was great on that. He said, don't check email in the morning. Schedule time for learning. Learn to split up your work into smaller tasks. That's an Agile thing. My mentor in Agile said, don't make them bowling balls. In other words, they can't be big and indivisible. They need to be small pieces that you're committing to. So instead of painting the house, it's going to be picking out a color. And he mentioned not having a guilt pile of books that you needed to read through. I think that's good, because I've got a ton of those books that I really want to get to, and all these blog articles, and it's piling up and it's weighing on me. So putting that aside is a good thing. And do check out TFS Preview, kanbanflow.com. I love that site. It's got a lot of free tools in it. Rescue time and the Pomodoro technique is very good as well. So, walk through TFS Preview. Are there any questions at all about what I've been talking about? Please go ahead.
So you guys do 2-week deliveries, but how often do you actually deliver software in Columbia?
Every 2 weeks.
Do you actually deliver
Yeah.
to,
It may be really, really crude.
but
yeah.
the done
To production?
and it's actually getting released to,
No. No. Continuous integration means release to QA, but a lot of times there's obstacles to releasing to production I can't commit to.
So how often do you release to production?
Well, we released it to production.
Yeah.
It depends. Like in PDM team, they have a branching. Elaine, you want to talk about that?
Well, the company, we've established a calendar, a 9-week calendar. It's a minor release calendar, and then you build your sprints inside of that. And the project managers and the application managers own that and say, okay, we're going to drive towards this timeline. So the idea is that every 9 weeks, we're rolling out to production. However, you can do out-of-cycle builds if you need to. You have things that can't wait for 9 weeks. Whether if it's a critical item that doesn't break fix because that's critical, or you can do an out-of-cycle build. So in reality, we have a set schedule every 9 weeks. It's rolling code. Like my applications or the PDM application, that rolls every 9 weeks, as well as we have, because it's an incredibly large, complex application, we also have to manage a lot of out-of-cycle builds. We try to minimize those, but our timeline from beginning of sprint planning to it going live is 9 weeks.
Right. So that's one team. With a lot of my team, we do web apps. So a lot of times we'll do a release to QA, and then our finish line is, did you show it to the business owner? Did they at least see it, right? And our release to production could be at any point. I mean, they could not be available, which happens quite a bit. They're on a trip to the Far East. Maybe it'll be months from then. I don't like committing my guys to to something that is dependent upon a different team, operations or this team. So the finish line is a release to QA quite often with WebApps we do. Other questions? Yes.
So you have a team, you all work together in this agile environment. How do you bring new people into this that have never done this before?
Julie's pretty new, and we just kind of dares to deep into the pool and what?
That's true.
Yes, that is true.
That's true.
We are getting better. Sometimes we give them little snorkels before I shove them in.
First week was hard.
The wiki we have is getting a lot better. I gotta tell you though, I mean, we're starting from ground zero. There's gaping holes in a lot of what we needed to have. And we kind of, each time we hit something, we add it to the wiki, and that's kind of our growing knowledge base. It is hard ramping new people on. Columbia's a lot like whitewater rafting quite often. Doing Agile has helped with sanity level. It doesn't mean I still don't have a hard time sleeping at night, to be honest with you. Because there's always midweek surprises. I can't tell you it's a rose garden. Yes?
So escalation processing, does that force an out-of-cycle build? And
Yeah, we've had to do that twice. We say, okay, do you want to pull the sprint? Okay. And we yank the sprint. And we're suddenly off of the map and working on this issue until it's resolved. And then everyone's working through the weekend, and I get a lot of dirty looks in the cafeteria. It's not pleasant. But as long as it doesn't happen too often, I think that's okay, you know.
Is that what you found? Is it minimal?
Yeah. It's only happened twice in 2 years. So, twice. We've had lots of emergencies, but never like an all-hands-on-deck thing. That happens rarely. So, I got a good group of people I work with.
You said you release in 9-week cycles, but then, I mean, that assumes then that you have one project that you're working on. I mean, in our situation, we have, you know, different sort of projects. I mean, you have developers working on this part of this PDM app, and there's this other part of PDM that might be a different customer set.
Right.
Right, and so we might have 3 or 4 or 5 different things going on that are working with different customers.
Right, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Now, this right here is an example of how our code repository looks like, because you do two things in TFS. You have a code repository where you're storing your stuff, and then you got your planning, like where you kind of, if you do planning, where you use your Agile template and you task things out. So how we work that, and this just got productionized last week, was we have our code repository. It's right there in green, top left. And then we have another project called planning, for example. Within planning, there's 5 different areas. One for PDM, one for Agility, one for the integration team that uses BizTalk, one for my guys. Each of those areas, I mean, is a group of programmers, right? And then, and that's how we're able to plan, and we're even able to associate, as long as it's within one project collection, and it is. I can associate code from the PDM project in green, the code repository, with a task or work item being done in the blue area. And I can also have a project field, so we can do a query, because PMs, again, they don't care. They don't care about who's doing it. They don't want to know about the hours. They want to know top level, is the work being done or not. That's why you have the project field associated with the story, so you can group across different teams what work is being done.
I think you missed my question, though. So my
Yeah.
customers are not across different areas. Within PDM,
Right.
I've got Silicon customers, I've got boards and customers. I have different internal customers.
Right.
All within just PDM.
Right.
That all have different requirements. All coming in.
Can I take that one?
Yeah.
So we do too. We roll out 25, 30, 35, 40 enhancements every 9 weeks with a whole different groups of customers. So what we've done is we took the template. One of the things that we did to make it a little easier is that each of those items has its own TFS issue. The other thing that we did was we updated the template that came, because that GUI that comes up through 2012 is just a template. You can modify it. We modified it by adding things like your business partner areas, the areas in the company you've identified. There's 15 groups in your company. So you can do drop downs in there. So we could identify these 6 go to this one area, these 5 go to this area, these 4 go over here. So you can easily report off it. But we're actually rolling out large chunks of data and multiple changes and multiple projects all at the same time. And then we task out those individually in the sprint process to identify, because I know approximately how much they can get done, and then we evaluate it, and then we set it with our programmers, and then they code it.
Right.
And it's tested out and rolled.
And your customers are willing to wait that additional 9
So-
weeks after it's, I mean,
So what we have is we have a working group with, it's a PDM prioritization group where I have representatives from each of the areas around the company. We meet once a month. Right now we're in some blueprinting stages, so we meet more often. But that way it's complete visibility, as well as they can pull down the list at any time. They can see, okay, this is going in this issue, this one's going here, this one's going in this release. They can identify. So, to be quite honest, the reason why we can roll out every 9 weeks is that we have complete visibility to our business partners. We continually keep them in the loop. They have complete access and they trust us. And the only way you get there is by having that open communication where they know what's going on. We don't hide anything from them. We say, this is what we're working on. I've got right now in my application, we've processed 2,600 items since November. That's insane. But we don't hide it. We say, okay, we still have a backlog of 300. I'm not hiding it. I'm bringing it every month going, here's the 300 from last month. Here's these 60 you've added. Let's go through and prioritize. Let's give you the top 50. And then they have to work as a group to identify them.
I don't know if we're about out of time or not. I have a feeling we are. Okay. But get off the stage, Harrison. I wish we had a view, and by the way, Elaine's been great to work with to come in with a custom template, and it's very easy, and it took us one day. But you'll see right there on the right-hand side in that template, we're able to change the area pretty quickly, and that way you can show your PMs the project view that they want, and you can still have your developers do their work within a unit of 4 or 5 or 10 guys by team. Yes?
How does QA work with the process you set up?
Can you explain a little more?
So I'm assuming you have, say, a 2-week sprint, and
Right.
at the end of it, you throw, the bits over the wall and say, okay, QA, it's for you to test now at this point. Why I guess I asked that is, what I understand, the Agile book, the manifesto, is both dev and QA is supposed to be done within that sprint. And I
Right.
worked for one company where the problem was, we were working all the way up to, the second Friday, and QA didn't have time to test it. Or we had an issue where it's regression testing, and it took QA, say, 3 times to test the same amount of time to actually implement.
Right. There's my team's definition of done. We have a couple different levels we go with. It's not always, unfortunately. Sometimes in some of our environments, getting out the door to QA, usually we can promise that, but as far as having it pass testing, like having a BA look at it and it approves, we can't always promise that. So sometimes we might split that up into 2 different sprints. First one is getting out to QA. The second backlog item we add is having a pass QA, right? Because it might be a couple weeks before we can get a BA to sign off. I will say, love the work, for example, Elaine is doing with the PDM team. Very tight integration. I think it leads to a smoother running development team. So, and I think it's bad to commit your team to work that they're not, that's responsible operations or the lab environment. You should only have a commitment for a developer that he's actually responsible for. I mean, we all know it's bad to have responsibility, not power, right? So, any other questions, I guess? Yes?
Is your KFS integrated with the SharePoint also? Do you guys use your SharePoint?
Yes. Well, that front end, for example, was SharePoint. The web front end, yes, it is. And we're also making a switch, for example, Elaine's team currently and some of our other BAs are moving away from not keeping documentation within tasks or even in stories, but in like a SharePoint document library. And they've always done this, but I mean, tasks and stories, they have a short shelf life. They last 2 weeks and they're gone. So put your documentation in a SharePoint document library where it'll be there for you next year. Because the same bugs seem to crop up again and again. Other questions, guys? Yes?
Test-driven development?
We do test-driven development, yeah. Quite successfully with footwear testing, for example.
What's that?
We did very successfully with footwear testing.
Okay.
One of our apps we did. I thought it was a very successful experiment.
How important do you think that is to Agile?
How important is it?
Is it outside, completely separate from that?
No, it's Agile and TDD work very well together. We also, yeah, it works. There's some rules there on TDD. By the way, the whole drawing here of Azure workload patterns cracks me up because that's basically Microsoft is saying everything fits Azure, right? Anyway, but for example, there's the 3 rules of TDD from Uncle Bob. And I can talk to you about it later. Give me your card, and I can send you kind of a little case study we did on TDD. It was very successful. So anyway, guys, I do think that's about it for my presentation. Come up afterwards and say hello, and I really appreciate your time and your attention. Thank you.
Any more questions, Dave? Well, I'm passing out.
Okay. Any more questions?
Are you using Azure?
Yeah.
Products?
That was awesome. Love Azure. Love Azure. It's been very successful, and people are surprised about how easy the GUI is to work with. I mean, it's been very, very painless. We would look for any excuse to use it again. Any excuse. It's been terrific. We've had our fair share of infrastructure hassles over the years. Things like load balancing, pesky network timeouts and things like that. Drive onto it. That's true. Like we did a virtualization move in Columbia that was just very successful in driving down the cost. But still, every machine comes with a certain slice of admin time, storage space cost. Everything comes with a cost. And if you look at the chart for VM moves and then Azure, I mean, you can really drive the cost per machine down because a lot of those machines are not fully utilized ever. So it's great for doing quick pilots. Sometimes I don't know how it works in your guys' environments, but spinning up new environments, new boxes is like pulling teeth. And Azure doesn't have that cost. For developers, it's great.
Well, as Adrian pointed out a few months ago, going on the cloud, you don't waste time upgrading. You just spin up the new one that's already upgraded.
Yeah, I think it's the future.
And you got your ticket, right?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you, Dave. Thanks very much.